is time to turn our attention back to the Olympic Games, because I am delighted to say we have got Timmy McCarthy with us, who you will have heard commentating brilliantly as ever on Team USA and men's and women's and all the other teams taking part in the basketball throughout the course of the last 10 days or so. Timmy, good morning to you. Thanks a million for taking the call.
No, great to be here. Looking forward to having a chat.
You're just off air, I believe, watching a bit of Team USA killing Australia earlier on.
Yeah, it was probably the most devastating performance I've seen by a women's team in my 5 Olympic Games. The USA came out in the first quarter and were awesome. I mean, genuinely, they were phenomenal. And I mean, they're the top-ranked team in the world and going for their 7th Olympic gold in a row. But the Australians are ranked 2nd. Now, they're missing their star player, Liz Cambridge, but they had no answer. The Americans was just devastating. And it's funny watching it and commentating on it, because you know the game just peters out, but you've got to stay with it, obviously, to stay commentating it and just enjoy the talent that was on show. And definitely this morning, the women's talent from the USA was just brilliant to watch.
Like, who was the standout this morning? Like, I saw Brianna Stewart racking up an incredible score.
Yeah, Brianna Stewart had 23, right, and Brittany Griner had 15. Now, Griner's interesting because she's 6'8" in height. She wears a size 18 shoe. Bigfoot is her nickname, and she was just so dominant on the boards. She was defensively, she was brilliant. Offensively, she has a really soft touch for such a tall athlete. But Brianna Stewart is to me the classy player on show, because she won 4 NCAA titles with UConn. So from her freshman year to her senior year, they won the NCAA in UConn the 4 years running. But what was even staggering was she was MVP for the 4 years. So the belief is that she is actually the greatest college player ever in American history. And right now on target to probably be one of the great WNBA players behind the likes of Lisa Leslie and Diana Taurasi. So Stewart was the star of the scoring, and Griner was the star of the domination, which sort of highlighted the gap today between the Americans and the Aussies.
It wasn't so easy for the men yesterday morning as they got past Spain. Possibly that could have been the gold medal match if the draw had gone differently. Like, there's an argument to be made that Spain are the second best team in this competition, but the USA seem to have recovered extremely well from their early stumble.
And you're right, it wasn't easy yesterday. I mean, the Spanish were interesting yesterday because the Spanish are the second best team, and you know, it could have been the gold medal match, but Spain lost to Slovenia, which ultimately got them this draw against the USA. The USA have recovered. There's no doubts from the French defeat in the first game. But I still think they're vulnerable. I still think this USA team are vulnerable. They have only 2 centres, and not really dominant centres in the sense of Adebayo and Draymond Green. So they're more power forward. So physically, the Spanish had a big height advantage, just say. But if you're a Spanish fan listening in, or if you're a Spanish team member, when you have 5 players of the standard of Marc and Pau Gasol, Rudy Fernandez, Alberto Albalde, and Alex Albrinas, who had averaged between 10 and 12 points each per game, to be scoreless in the Olympic quarterfinal, you're not going to get it done against most teams, and definitely not against the Americans.
Yeah, I guess they made up for it a little bit with Ricky Rubio going off for a good section of the game. And I guess there is a certain element, maybe over the last 2 Olympic Games, that we're starting to see the impact of the NBA being a truly global league in the competitiveness of the Olympic Games.
We saw it at first, I think, explode on the scene in 2004 with Argentina winning the gold and beating the Americans on the way. And you had Manu Ginobili and Luis Scola. But Ginobili probably was the big star internationally at that point in time. But since then, it has exploded. And this has all come about as a result of the 92 decision by the Olympic Council to allow the Americans to bring the professionals in. There's no doubts that the Americans' influence has transported around the world. But there's no more foreigners playing in the NBA than at any stage. And they're performing in the NBA. I mean, Luka Doncic right now, the big discussion in the States at the moment is he the best player in the NBA? Or is he in the top 3 in the NBA, you know, behind obviously Kevin Durant and James Harden? So they're the big questions. That would never have been the case. Even when Ginobili was at his best and Tony Parker, you know, the French guy when he played with San Antonio, were never at their best, you know, and guys like Sabonis, they were never considered to be at the top echelons, where now Luka Doncic is now being talked about in the USA. Some experts would say he is the best player in the NBA. Some other people would say that Durant or Harden are the best. But the fact that international players are now at that level in the NBA means that when you get to competitions like the Olympics, there's a chance more consistently now for the Americans, particularly in the men's game, to get toppled.
And there's a perfect opportunity for Luka Doncic to answer that question this weekend.
Yeah, and we're covering that game tomorrow. Slovenia and France will be the game that RT will be showing in the semi-final. And, you know, France are undefeated. They're top of the Americans. I mean, they have a stacked load of NBA stars. And, you know, they have the New York Knicks, Frank Ntilikina, who hasn't played only a couple of minutes. He picked up an injury, so he's coming back into it. But I think that, you know, Slovenia have just got a brilliant basketball team. Without Doncic, they're exceptional from my point of view. They're great shooters. They're typical Eastern Europeans. And there's a stat that I haven't used yet, so I'll actually give it to you, which I think is fascinating. America has 330 million people. Argentina has 50 million people. Spain has 50 million. Germany, 80 million. Okay? So all the big powers have huge amount of population. Slovenia has just under 2 million people in its population. That's about 25% more than Dublin, if you think about it in a population sense. And they are now in the final four in the Olympics. They're European champions, and they've created a phenomenal basketball team. And at the moment, one of the two biggest superstars in the world in Luka Doncic. So from a small country, you can actually achieve big things. And I think that Slovenia have shown that in a sport where you wouldn't expect a team or a country of that size to be dominant. I think Doncic will lead them to the final. I really believe that they've got the talent to beat this French team. But it won't be easy, and it could be a cracking game tomorrow.
Timmy, you touched on Kevin Durant, been right in the conversation when you're talking about the best players in the NBA right now. As the leader of Team USA at this Olympic Games, how has he responded to the shock of that defeat early on to France? Has he really stepped up over the last week or so?
Well, in the first game against France, that defeat you talk about, he picked up fouls early and he struggled. And in the next two games, they were easy games. They played Iran, and Iran are not a good basketball team. So they had a very comprehensive win against Iran by over 60 points. So, you know, you can't judge on that. But in the game yesterday against Spain, Durant was at his absolute best. I mean, he really stepped up. I mean, he's the leading scorer in American history. He's made more field goals in Olympic basketball in American history. After 3 games, Carmelo Anthony had all these leading stats. I see actually overnight he's signed for the Lakers on a free trade to team up with LeBron. So Melo had all the advantages, but he played in 4 games. So Melo was the leading scorer. Durant is now the leading scorer. Melo was the leading free throw shooter. Durant is now the leading free throw shooter. Melo was the leading field goals made. Durant is now. So he has stepped up. But yesterday, he was at his best. He was ruthless yesterday. I mean, he hit 4 threes. He was dominant all over the floor. Defensively, he was brilliant. I mean, he's 6'9". He moves like a gazelle. He shoots with the softest of touches. So he has definitely stepped up as the leader. But they need him because some of the other guys, you know, like even though they're so talented, like I'm not convinced in the stretch, in the real difficult situations, that they would be able to pull them out if Durant doesn't step up. Because if you go back to 2008 and 12 and 16, when the Spanish, you know, really put up the Americans in those 3 Olympics, it was the late Kobe Bryant in 2008 and 2012 who pulled the Americans out of the fire in the fourth quarter. And it was LeBron in 2016 and Durant together pulled them out. I'm not sure if Durant doesn't perform in the remaining semi-final, and if they get to the final, have the other guys who can actually really dig down deep enough. And that's where I see their vulnerability. They're still the best talent, but the big question is, are they the best team? And that will be answered over the next 4 days.
As somebody who's watched your coverage of the basketball over the last few games, I definitely think KD gets you as excited as any other player in the games. Although there's a close contender this year, I feel. Damian Lillard, I think, is getting you very excited, and Dame Dolla, as you're calling him, and that's your latest catchphrase, Timmy, on a phenomenal player and a phenomenal point guard.
I love him. I love him. I just think that Lillard is the complete point guard. I mean, first of all, his shooting action is so pure. I love watching pure shooters. And he's just got the most beautiful, you know, purity in his shot and the extension that he gets. Obviously, he's a great athlete, so, you know, he can extend. But he handles the ball so well. He's a great passer on the floor. So he excites me. So himself, as Dame Dolla is what, I think that's his R&B name that they use in the States. So he really excites me along with KD. I think KD is the best player right now in the game. I just think that what he has, his ability to deliver, I just think he's the best player. But Lillard has the chance to be, in the next period of time at that echelon. But Doncic, to me, is the complete player as well. So they're the three that really excite me. The rest of them I enjoy watching, but they bring me to a different stratosphere with the talent that they have and the way they execute it in big situations.
Yeah, it would just be so good to see them all on the court together going for the gold medal before this thing is out. Just in terms of your own commentary, Timmy, over the last little while, I think that there's always new people who become more familiar with it every 4 years or 5 years, as it is in this case. Can you take us back to maybe the first Olympic Games that you did, the kind of development of some of your catchphrases, the BOOMSHAKALAKA to the downtown? Do you remember developing those phrases and actually coming to prominence on that front?
I do. I remember the 2004 games in Athens, and I arrived to carry out the role of being the analyst. So my role with RT up to 2004, I was the analyst. So I was the person who would analyze the game and would give the technical explanation of what was going on. Because obviously, as a former international coach and international captain, I've played at that level. And on the first day I arrived, Jack Kenny was to be the men's commentator and Sean O'Sullivan was to be the women's commentator. I was there in advance to them, and there was a women's game on between the Czech Republic and Spain. And the director said to me, "Look, we're running ahead of schedule. Will you go in and commentate on that women's game?" And I said, "I've never commentated." I said, "Just go in and commentate, and look, we probably won't use it, but at least if we had to put some time in." And I went in, and it was a really exciting game, which went to overtime. And I just started commentating, and the next day they said, "Well, I'm going to become the commentator." And Ger, who's a good friend of mine, was very generous and said, "Look," he was happy for me. And then Sean had to take the role of analyst. And words like coast to coast and downtown are basketball sayings. They're words that we would use regularly in basketball. Boom shakalaka just came out of my mouth on the first dunk I saw, with the excitement of it in the games in Athens. And it has stayed. And as my commentary, as I've got more experience over the 5 Olympic Games, what I do as a commentator, when I was an analyst, my job was to inform about what was happening. Was a zone defense from man to man? Should they go inside? Should they play outside? Should they look for fast breaks? Give the technical explanations. But as a commentator, I believe my job is to inform and entertain. And, I love sport. I love commentating on all sports. I've commentated on GA, I've commentated on golf, and obviously basketball is the most prominent sport I've commentated on. And I want to bring the passion that I have for the sport, and I want to bring the information that I know about the sport. I think what gives me advantages in basketball is that I played at Olympic and European and World Championship level. So as a player, and I've coached at that level. So I understand what the coaches are trying to do, and I understand what the players are trying to execute. And then my passion and my enjoyment of seeing the best in the world perform at their best when it matters is what obviously comes out. And thankfully for me, most people seem to enjoy it.
And I think one thing that's becoming really evident during this games as well is that yourself and Sean O'Sullivan have this great relationship with one another on air, where both of you are just getting so unbelievably excited about what you're seeing, and that really translates to the viewer then, who feel that excitement as well. It seems that the two of you almost make each other more excited the further the game goes and the more crazy things actually get within a game.
I have a great relationship with Sean. I've known Sean all my life. He was a former player with my own club before I became a senior player. Sean was on the senior team, and we've developed a very good relationship off the court and off the cameras over the years, personally. But on the games and the commentary, it's a good match because, Sean comes in with points at different points in time in the game, which complement obviously what I'm doing. And he has a different view on the game, which is very important. So he's not just, saying what I'm saying. He has his own view on how basketball should be played. And I believe that comes across. So it works really well. I mean, it's some people call it the dynamic duo. Some people call it other things, maybe not as complimentary. But it does work well in the context of what's there. And we love doing it. And, we both say to each other, at the end of every Olympic Games, how do we get here? How honored I am and how humbled I feel to be, commentating, for RT on these games. And, it really is humbling for somebody to be at these games as a commentator, watching the best in the world and realizing like that I'm a lucky guy. I'm getting to look at and commentate the best players in the world in the Olympic Games, and I just love doing it.
Do you think... Sorry, go for it, Nathan.
Sorry, Timmy, I was just going to say, you're obviously just after coming off a commentary. With the time difference, do you find it straightforward to bring the usual Timmy McCarthy energy to a commentary at 3 a.m. or 6 a.m?
I do, actually. It's funny, it is, when people meet me, outside of the commentary, and even in conversations like this, they don't associate this voice and the voice that they hear on television. And when I get to the comment, once I'm, ready for start, I just go. I just really go with it. And, and even in the last game, where really from the first quarter, the game was over, I wasn't as enthusiastic in the 40th minute, for the final basket as I was in the first minute when it was a nail-biting game. It's obviously more enjoyable when it's nail-biting, and most of the games in these games have been very tight. But I just, I got a great lesson from the late Jimmy McGee, who said to me, when I got the gig in Athens, he said, just be yourself. Learn from others, but just be yourself. And I've just tried to be myself in my commentary in any sport that I've done over the years. And I get up for it every time. That's the key. So when I'm involved, I'm at it, and I'm giving my best of myself in each commentary I give. So yes, whether it's 3 a.m. in Irish time, or whether it's 8 in the evening Irish time, I'm going to give the best I can for the 2 hours or so that I'm commentating on each of the games.
You mentioned there the size of Slovenia a few moments ago, and maybe all they do is play basketball and cycle. Maybe that's all they do. But do you think it's a pipe dream to think that one day you might commentate on Ireland at the Olympic Games?
Oh, I don't think that's a pipe dream at all. I think that, the opportunity for Ireland, and it's a long journey. But I mean, I can remember my final year and playing before I retired. I was captain of Ireland, and we played in the European Small Nations in Malta. And we played Iceland in the first group game, and we beat them comfortably. And I got injured in the semi-final, so I missed the final against Iceland. And Iceland actually beat us in the final. And they're now in the top echelons in European basketball, and we're still in the small nations. So, there's so many Irish-American players in the States. Pat Connaughton, who played with Milwaukee and won an NBA ring, has said publicly he would want to declare for Ireland and play for Ireland. So there's a lot of talent available to us internationally in the American side, and obviously our own Indigenous players. So at a future point in time, you've got to get through the European Championships to qualify, obviously, or the qualifiers. But it's possible. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible. Because if you go back, 25 years ago and said Ireland would win a gold and bronze medal in rowing at the Olympics, people would have laughed and said, not a hope. And we've done that in 2021 for the games of 2020. So you never know. It would be brilliant to do it, but it will take a lot of work. But I do believe it's possible, because in what I've learned over the years from my own sporting career, and now looking at it from behind the camera, everything is possible if you pay the price and stay long enough with it. And that's the challenge for Irish basketball.
Yeah, it would be amazing to one day see it. Timmy, it's been great catching up with you. Can't wait to see KD and Damian Lillard and Doncic on court before the end of the week, and you commentating again. So thanks a million for taking the call, and best of luck with the rest of the games.
Great to talk to you. I will see you when we get back.